Dr. J. Smith completely puts Muhammad Hijab in his place, leaving him in complete silence. He has no refutations whatsoever for any of his claims, and he instead just continues to insult Dr. J. Smith whenever he can't defend Islam. Please go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, share this with someone you believe it could be edifying with, and let's get into it.
5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And I'm going to let you begin with the 5 minutes. And what I've asked Muhammad to do is to show me and to prove to us how Islam began from the classical model. And I'm going to say and critique him from historical, what history tells us.
We said it's going to be Islam versus Christianity and stuff like that, yeah?
The emergence of Islam, how Islam began
Versus Christianity. Okay.
versus Christianity from the classical model versus the historical model.
This is going to be interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Tell me when to start. Okay,
Go ahead, start.
Let's start right here. And right now, can you choose, sir? All right, what I want to say generally is that Islam, as a basic thing, has two connotations. We can say there's Islam with a small I and Islam with the big I. Islam with a small I literally means submission in Arabic. It comes from the Arabic word istislam. We believe that every prophet was a Muslim in the sense that they were submissive to their Lord. So we believe that the first human being to be on this planet, Adam, was in fact submissive and was Muslim. So if the question is how did Islam emerge, the answer is simply that Islam emerged when the first human being set foot on this earth. That's how Islam emerged. Now if you're talking about Islam with the big I, which has a connotation of the Prophet Muhammad, and other than that, then clearly that happened in the 7th century with the birth and prophethood of what we call Prophet Muhammad, the last and final messenger. We say that these two prophets all came, and all those who came between them, which some hadith say 124,000 prophets, all came with the same fundamental message to believe in the one God and to worship the one God. This message is not only iterated and reiterated in the Qur'anic discourse, but no doubt it's iterated and reiterated in the biblical discourse, which is why you'll find in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and 6 verse number 4, where it says, Shema Yisrael Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad. That, hear, O Israel, your Lord, our Lord is one God. Now here, my question is, this has always been the theological underpinning of all of the prophetic sayings, including Moses and Abraham and Jesus, which is why you'll find in the Old Testament that there really is nothing that indicates a Trinity. And I challenge J. Smith today to prove to the contrary of that. I challenge J. Smith today to give me one unequivocal, unambiguous...
We're not talking about the Trinity. Let's keep to the history of Islam.
Excuse me. Unambiguous verse in the Old Testament which refers to the Trinity. Because what we're saying is, how did both of these religions
hold on to
start?
that.
How did Islam start versus how did Christianity start? The answer is this: Islam has always been there, as I've just explained, my model. However, Christianity undertook a clear historical development, which is what I will prove today, which started with Binitarianism and continued on to Trinitarianism, and Theodosius II in the year 381 literally forced Christians to adopt the triune position and to completely forget about all of the other models, including Arianism and subordinationism. So here, if you compare the theological underpinnings of Islam and how Islam is consistent with all of its prophets,
Can you hear him?
with the Christian message, and how, number one, the Old Testament is not consistent with the New Testament, and number two, that it was clear to any objective historian that there was a clear historical development in Christianity, that which meant for the councils like Council of Nicaea, Constantinople, Chalcedon in 325, 381 and 451 respectively, to formulate the theological creed of the Christians. My question is, why don't you just go back to what the Old Testament says? Why don't you go back to Deuteronomy chapter number 6, verse number 4, where it clearly states, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, your Lord, our Lord is one God. This is the kind of thing that all of the prophets came with. This is the same message that the Prophet Muhammad came with, and no doubt we believe this is the same message that Jesus came with. How long do I have left? 1 minute, that's brilliant. Okay, now, so the things I've been able to raise here in today's discussion. Point one, that Islam has two different connotations. You have Islam with a small I, and you have Islam with the big I. Islam with the small I is submission, which all of the prophets. He's still got a minute. You've got 40 seconds. Got 40 seconds. 43 seconds. Islam with the small I has always been in existence. In fact, it exists for inanimate and animate, because anything can submit to God's law. And this is exactly the same thing as Jesus has said. That I have not come to submit to myself, but to the Father who sent me in John chapter 5 verse 8. I just say, listen, let's go back to Jesus' message. That's being a true Christian. If you want to be a true Christian today, it's not to follow this made-up concept by churches of the Trinity. Ladies and gentlemen, to be a true Christian means to go back to what Moses says, to Abraham says, and to what Jesus says. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, your Lord, our Lord, is one Lord.
Thanks, Muhammad. Now, have you noticed he used the Islam with the big I and Islam with the small I? His definition of Islam with the small I are all people that want to believe, but the big I are those that specifically follow the Prophet Muhammad. I'm going to use two different definitions for small I and big I. I would suggest that the big I is the historical Islam, the small I is the Islam of faith. And the Islam of faith is dependent on some fraudulent material. Now, what do you mean by fraudulent material? Everything he's going to tell you about how Islam began. Now, he says that Abraham was a Muslim. I'm sure he wasn't. Moses was a Muslim. I'm sure he wasn't. Jesus was a Muslim. None of the prophets were Muslim. This word didn't even exist at the time that they were living in 1900 BC, 1400 BC, and the first century. But what we do know is that even the Prophet Muhammad, his Prophet Muhammad, we have difficulty knowing who he was. Because you've all heard that Prophet Muhammad was born in 570 and died in 632. Started receiving revelations in 610 to 632 for 22 years. But where does that story come from? Where does the story of Muhammad come from? Does it come from people that knew him? No, it doesn't. Who was the first to write down about the story of Muhammad that we have today? Where's the first extant material? Written by Ibn Hisham is his name. He died in 833. Muhammad died in 632. 200 years before they finally get the story of Muhammad down. Now, what about the things he said? The hadith. You have Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi. Look at all these hadith, these sayings of the Prophet. When did Al-Bukhari die? 870. That's 240 years after Muhammad died. So everything he's going to tell you about the Muhammad or Islam with the small I is dependent on source material that comes from Ibn Hisham 833, Al-Waqidi 835, Sahih Muslim 870. Everyone that comes after Bukhari is post 870. The tafsir only get first written down by a man named Al-Tabari 923. Now, can you see the problem? All they know about Islam with the small I comes from 200 to 300 years later. When you look at Jesus Christ, folks, we have material from the very century and from the very time period he lived. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John were all living at the time of Jesus Christ. Matthew, Mark, and Luke were writing within 30 to 40 years of Christ's death. Did they know Jesus? Yes, they did. Did they see Jesus? Yes, they did. Did they hear what he said? Yes, they did. Matthew and John were eyewitnesses to that which they wrote. Mark and Luke got it from the eyewitnesses. Show me one eyewitness of Muhammad from with any of his traditions, from what he said and what he did. You cannot show me anybody that was living at that time. They lived hundreds of years later and hundreds of miles away. Therefore, I would suggest the Islam, the big I Islam of history is not the real Islam. And we need to go back and unpack what we do now know about Islam. Where is it that this religion began? I only have a minute to do that. I can't do it in the first minute. But can you see, we're going to do like with like. We're going to look at the historical record for both religions. We're going to show that when you look at Christianity, when you look at the person of Jesus Christ, the fact that he died on the cross, something that Islam disputes, the fact that he rose again, that's what true Christians believe. Every Christian wants to know, did God, in the form of Jesus Christ, did he die and rise again? is that a historical fact? Can we show that Jesus did die? Muslims can't do that. Muslims can only assume he did not die. There's only one reference in the Quran, Surah 4, Ayah 157. One reference to say he did not die. If he did not die and rise again, I'm damned. And so is everybody here who's listening to me. Christianity is not just the Trinity like he would like to say. Christianity is the fact that God came to earth, God died on the cross, God rose again for everyone here, and that's a historical event. What Muhammad did, what Muhammad said, we're now seeing is not historical. We're going to unpack that for you and show you what we mean. And we're going to show you how difficult it is going to be for Muhammad to show me that Islam, the big I, the real historical Islam, is the real Islam. We're going to show you the big C, Christianity. There is only one Christianity, and that's the historical Christianity. God bless you. Over to you, Muhammad.
Thank you very much, Jake. This is really going to become very embarrassing today. No.
Let them decide that.
No. This is going to be really, really embarrassing today.
I just find it so interesting how Muhammad can't defend any of the claims that he's making. He can't refute it. And so this is the reason why Muhammad Hijab has to resort to insults and resort to manipulation tactics and all this stuff because he doesn't have any evidence for the claims he's making. And it is true, regardless if you're Christian, Muslim, whatever religion you are, the historical fact is that the Bible actually came before the Qur'anic manuscripts. And we see that the biblical manuscripts actually are traced back to the time of Christ. Christianity and their belief system was traced back to Christ when Islam was a random religion created hundreds or 1,000 years later.
He says that the first books of Hadith, or the first books of, let's say, compilation of Ibn Hijab, Ibn Ishaq, which he couldn't pronounce properly, and I'm sure that he has not been able to tap those books in the primary source material because لا تستطيع أن تتكلم باللغة العربية الفصحى. هل تستطيع أن تتحدث باللغة العربية الفصحى؟
So do you speak Greek to talk about?
So you can't speak Arabic, so you can't excuse me, calm down. That's point number one. Point number two here.
Look how upset he is. He's trying to assert his dominance and he's trying to speak in Arabic, knowing, or hopefully, I don't know if Dr. J. Smith speaks Arabic, but he's speaking Arabic to basically confuse the masses because he knows most people, even Muslims, don't speak Arabic. That's the way he feels like he can assert dominance and the way he says, oh, calm down. Dr. J. Smith wasn't upset. All he was doing was laughing at you because you sound ridiculous. But of course, Muhammad Hijab, he has to resort to these manipulative tactics because it's the only way he can assert his false masculinity. And as you guys can see in this video, he'll start flexing and he's wearing this sleeveless shirt to show off how much of a macho man he is. But the reality is he's an insecure little boy, in my opinion, based off of the video we're seeing.
Is what I wanted to make. Can you hear me, guys? Yeah? Is that he is making the fallacy of believing that because the compilers compiled the hadith 200 to 300 years after the Prophet's death, that the hadith didn't exist before that. How embarrassing. How ridiculous. How ahistorical. Do you not know how the science of hadith works according to the Muslims? You've been standing here for years, my friend, and you haven't bothered to ask someone like me how science of hadith works. Let me educate you. I know you're my elder, but I must educate you today. Yes, it will happen. You'll be educated, J. Smith, by someone who is at least a third of your age. At least, actually, maybe not that bad. Okay, how so? Let me tell you something. The way the chains work, we have a chain. We have a chain for the Quran. We have many chains for the Quran. We have chains for the Hadith. All of those chains are for people that have actually met the Prophet, seen the Prophet. Let me give you one example. One Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which says, "Man kadaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawwa maq'adahu min an-nar." Whoever lies about me intentionally, so let him prepare his seat in hellfire. This is narrated by at least 42 Sahabis, according to the scholars of Hadith. Some scholars of Hadith say 120 Sahabis, meaning companions of the Prophet, saw this and narrated it to other people. He's embarrassing himself Additionally, by trying to compare the hadith sciences, which is something he doesn't have, with the biblical narrative. Now let's read the books of Bar-Arman. He said that the people that saw Jesus Christ, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John saw Jesus Christ. Not in scholarly circles. You can say that to your audiences, to your passive audience that are not educated maybe. To the rednecks in the Bible Belt region who are racist, some of them, and they just accept any preacher's words. Maybe you can make those statements there. But my friend, you can't make those statements to an educated audience who know very well that the scholarly works like the works of Bar-Arman indicate very well.
He says there is no shadow of turning.
Excuse me.
Jesus died.
I mean, guys, this is just so ridiculous. Look how this dude is literally just trying to insult and belittle Christians because he literally can't refute his claim. I haven't heard him refute one claim that Dr. J. Smith has made so far. Just insults and deflections.
Those scholarly works indicate very clearly, guys, that Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, first of all, are pen names. We don't know who these guys are. The actual earliest sources are sources like Matthew, Mark and Luke. John is the oldest one according to Bar-Arman, and these sources come, as he said, about 100 years after Jesus Christ. No one saw Jesus and told us about him from the people that he's mentioned. He's lying to you, as he does usually, and he's been caught on camera talking about there's no pork being sold in Morrison's. That's a lie, and this is a lie, and that's an ahistorical account. So here, how can you account for the fact that you're standing here in front of me and the people here, your Christian friends, and telling us, you're telling us all to believe in a Bible which is not reliably transmitted? No, I challenge you. I challenge you to give me one chain of narration which goes back to the companions of Jesus. If you do the same to me, I will easily do it. In fact, let's do it now. We have chains of narration. For example, Asim, he's been taught by Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, who's been taught by Uthman, who's been taught by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One chain. Okay, do the same thing. Now I've shown you that this is just one singular chain, but actually you have thousands of Sahaba, of companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, meeting him and writing down as well as verbally transmitting what he's done. How do you account for that, my friend? You can't read the primary source materials. I have to be the translating link that helps you. Don't stand there in a position of education. You're there in a position of learning now. You're there in a position of learning now. The child is going to teach the old man. No problem. The child is going to teach the old man because you don't know what I know. And that's the bottom line. Challenge one, get me a chain. Get me a chain that goes back to Jesus Christ. A chain of provenance that goes back to Jesus Christ. Option two, after you've given me the chain, if you can't get me the chain, then admit that actually the first person to see the first compilations we have are at least 100 years afterwards. Thank you very, very much.
Okay. Oh, I love what he's done. Do you notice he said the young man's going to teach the old man? I am the older man, and I do know what we're talking about. Let me ask him very quickly, where is this chain that he talks about? Where is there any document? He said they wrote them down. Where are those documents from the time of Muhammad through the 7th century, up into the 8th century, and into the 9th century? Why is it we don't have anything written down for 200 years? If he likes the chain so much, show me one piece of document. Show me. Where are they? They don't begin to appear until 833. That's why I said very clearly, the earliest manuscripts that we have, the earliest documentation we have for the Siratul Rasulullah, the first that we have is Ibn Hisham. He gets it from Ibn Ishaq, but he is not a student of Ibn Ishaq. He's dependent on someone else. Where did Al-Bukhari, writing in the late 9th century, 240 years later, where did he get his material from? There's nothing written down. Now you might say they didn't need to write it down. They memorized it. Folks, can you see what we're talking about? That's 240 years of oral tradition. Do you trust oral tradition? I don't trust it. If I were to tell you something, and he were to tell him, and he were to tell him, by the time it gets over to that man, what I've told you and what he's told me has been changed. And if that could happen in 15 minutes, can you imagine what happens in 240 minutes, 40 years? But here's the real problem. Why did none of these people write it down? The chain that he's going to come up with. Why did not one of them write it down? Were they not educated? Was there no writing material? Remember, by the time that Abdul Malik comes to power in 685, Islam had spread all the way from Spain in the west to India in the east. Are you telling me that from India to Spain, no one can read and write? Please, folks, the fact that nothing was written down, the fact that they cannot even come to anything that they can show us from the 7th century, from the 8th century of any of these traditions, proves that these were finally written down in the 9th century. And that's why we don't trust them. I don't trust oral tradition because I know how it can be embellished. I can know how it can be changed. We can even look at the Quran. Show me one Quran that comes from the 7th century. Show me one Quran that comes from the time of Uthman. Show me any manuscript, the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Mayil manuscript, the Husseini manuscript, the Petropolitanus manuscript, the Sana manuscript, the 6 major manuscripts. Show me one of them that comes from the time of the Prophet himself, or that comes from the time of Uthman, that even comes from the same century as the time of Uthman, the 7th century. Folks, every one of these major manuscripts, the earliest that the Muslims have, only begin to appear in the 8th century. Now, there's a problem there. We're talking about the 8th century. I know he loves to mock me. This is the only thing he can do. Mock is the only thing he has left, because he cannot come up with anything, any material to prove to you and me that the Quran or the traditions existed at.
Yo, Muhammad is very sassy here. I mean, look at Muhammad Hijab. He's like flickering his wrist. I mean, I guess he's just following the perfect example, like his false prophet Muhammad, because he's acting very sassy and he's acting like, I don't know, what is he trying to be, Spider-Man or what? But it's very odd.
The time of Muhammad, or existed in the same time as Muhammad. Now, I won't do this to him because I'm too big for that. But see, can you see the problem? Be careful of what you're going to hear. Be careful of who you're listening to. He will tell you that these change of names are there. Yes, and that's all they are. They're nothing more than change of names. History is what we're looking at today. And the Islam with the big I, the Islam of history, has to be documented. The fact that we can go back to the Bodmer Papyrus, the John Rylands manuscripts, these are right here in Manchester, and also we have them in Switzerland. These are the kind of documents that we can go back. The fact that we can go to the Chester Beatty manuscripts. The fact that we can go to all the manuscripts. We have 365 manuscripts of the New Testament alone that begin to appear even before Islam came onto the world stage. Therefore, why is it Islam can't even come up with one document of their Quran from the 7th century? Mock me as you want to, Muhammad, but you've got to come up with some better material than that. Don't give me oral tradition. Don't give me speculation. Show me a manuscript that you can prove that sits at the same time that Muhammad lived, the same time that Uthman lived, and I can show you that we can beat you by hundreds of years. I thank God for the Bible, and I thank God for his tradition, and I thank God for those people who spoke about him, and I thank God that we can show that Christianity is historical. Prove it to me now. I'm not going to mock you like you mocked me. I'm going to let you now speak freely. Go ahead.
I'm a young man. Let me have my fun. All right. Now you've made a challenge. I'm going to meet your challenge unlike you, because people would have really...
I mean, guys, I honestly, at this point, Muhammad Hijab just loses the debate. You guys can go ahead and watch the full debate on their channels and stuff. I'll put in the link below, but honestly, it's just so ridiculous. Like, if you have to resort to insults and mocking somebody, and you guys could just see the insecurity raging through him. But gosh, this is so embarrassing for Muhammad Hijab, because he clearly gets humiliated because he can't respond to any of Dr. J. Smith's arguments. He completely humbled him in the matter of like less than 5 minutes. And it's just so hilarious because at this point, Muhammad Hijab is just going to keep rambling and rambling and rambling about how he's younger and he has less education, when in reality, it's just because you're following a false religion. Islam is false. It's hard to defend falsehoods, but it's easy to defend the truth, the word of God, Christianity. So I think that's where his big issue is he has a lot of pride, and it comes from a place of insecurity. That's the reason why Muhammad Hijab gets very insecure like that, and he has to go ahead and insult other people. It's a very common deflection and manipulation tactic he does.
Realize now that I have quoted scholars like Bar Ehrman, who have written scholarly books, who have made it very patently clear to people like yourself
And it's just funny because then he's just going to go on and continue saying how Bart Ehrman is basically a good source when actually Bart Ehrman says things like this against Christianity, but also against Islam as well. So he's not like this is scholar that hates Christianity only. I mean, he does hate Christianity, but he also talks about Islam and how perverted their false prophet Muhammad was. So it's very disingenuous whenever Muslims try to use him as if he only makes rebuttals against Christianity as a secular scholar or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I know Muslims are going to be disingenuous in the comments. Oh, why'd you cut it off? The reality is, guys, I don't want to listen to Muhammad Hijab spew nonsense for the next 20-30 minutes. I can do other things better with my time. No offense, guys. And I don't want to waste you guys' time like that, truly, genuinely. But it's very important for us to know the gospel, the true gospel of Jesus Christ, that he is God. 3, he died on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins, and 3 days after resurrected so that we can all be saved if we just believe in him. And that's the good news, guys. Please go ahead and share this with someone that you believe it could be edifying. Smash that like button, subscribe, comment, and share your opinions below. And I hope you guys have a blessed week, and God bless.